Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? This is the Class in Session podcast. I am your host, Logan Taylor, with my amazing co host, my partner in crime, Mr. Dontay Hampton. He couldn't be with us at this moment. But of course, I just want to shout out Dante. And we got a special guest today, Mr. Randy Dougherty. He has been in the education space for 26 years. So of course, let's shout out to him for that. Let's give him a hand clap for that. And for the last 2 years, he has been the superintendent of the Skyline School District. So I want to welcome him. He has a lot of experience. He has a great point of view, and suggestions and things that he's going to give out to us today. So, Mr. Dougherty, welcome to the Class in Session podcast.
Hey, I appreciate that. Thanks for the very generous introduction. But time to talk. I won't pass up an opportunity to talk education or the current topics at any time.
Absolutely, absolutely, I love it. So as well as I forgot to tell you all, he created a lockdown app. Super dope app, super dope. Definitely gonna touch on that, and touch on your journey into education and things of that nature. So if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, as well as touch on the lockdown app, and why you created it, and what is the point of it, and things of that nature.
You bet. You bet. Well, I've been, like you said, I've been a high school principal for 18 years. You learn a lot of things during that time, and you obviously are one of my biggest responsibilities during that time is school safety, and it's it's undoubtedly the most important thing we do. It used to be teaching our kids, but that slowly has converted to getting our kids home safe every day. But when we have issues at schools, most people that have been doing it a while, they find and see holes in our communication. For example, this fall we were in a soft lockdown, is what we call it, but um, and I was most of the time the administrators are out and about, and so I was out of the office and I radioed, which a lot of schools use radios, and all but one of our offices didn't get that radio announcement that we were going to lock down, and so they were unaware for about 7 to 10 minutes, which it thankfully wasn't a threatening. It didn't end up being a threatening situation, but when you have a radio in an office that you're supposed to have turned up, but you also have parents coming in talking and communicating, it's irritating. So it gets turned down. But so the issue that I see that we need, and then my app has been created to fix, is the communication. One, that you put a panic button in the hands of any staff member in your building. We're going to give it to all of ours. So if there was a threat anywhere in our building, any staff member can set that thing off. It goes out as like an Amber Alert alarm. It'll override the silent settings, and then immediately when they receive it, then we're all on one communication thread. So everybody can communicate in one spot. An update, hey, this is where the bad guy is, or this is we need help, or whatever. Just very simple. It's not providing, it's not putting your plans out there. It's not, we're not trying to sell stuff we don't need. But you include the authorities in that so they can see the same communication and arrive, with that information. Just trying to do something good for schools. Borrowed the money to do it, so hoping to break even there, but trying to provide it at an affordable cost for all schools, not like big technology that it seems that a lot of the big schools are the only ones that can afford. So there's a communication problem that you see in a lot of these situations. Uvalde, Parkland, in the middle of these situations, most people don't know what's going on. They didn't get a chance to lock down. The lockdown announcement doesn't come. So we're trying to help with that and fix that.
That's different. I've never heard. We've never had anybody come on the podcast and talk about them creating an application and things of that nature. So I think that's super duper dope, and I think that that's pretty awesome. So congratulations on that. I
Appreciate it.
think that that's a dope solution to a problem, right? Like we talked about it before
Yeah.
we got on the podcast, about the problems and having solutions for that. So I think that that's super
Yeah.
dope. Why did you get into education?
My dad was a lifelong school person, teacher, administrator. He had three brothers that did the same. So it was really growing up. My mom worked at a school, and growing up as a kid, it's really where I lived. I didn't go home after school like most kids. I hung around for my ride. So I'm at school all the time and around coaches all the time, around teachers, influential people. And for a while, in college, I tried to resist it a little bit because I honestly, I wanted to do something where I could make a little more money. Uh, but in the end, um, deciding to do what I wanted to do, that won out. And so it's just been a lot of education influences in my life. And that's both my brothers were in education. It's kind of a family thing. It's all we know, really.
So education runs deep, you say.
You bet. You bet. Yeah, that's cousins. I've got cousins in the area here and in Southwest Missouri, cousins in Iowa and Nebraska that are all in education. So yeah, it's a common theme when we get together. There's plenty to talk about.
I love it. I love it. I love it. What is a common myth about your job that I know you've been in education for 26 years, um, but when you were a principal, right? Because now you're a superintendent. You've been a
Yeah.
superintendent for the past 2 years, but when you were a principal, what was a common myth about your job that you would just say you can't be serious, right? And the same thing for being a superintendent, right? Because there's a whole different plate of things that you take on with being the superintendent and being the top dog for your school district. So could you touch on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, being a superintendent the last 2 years, I don't even know if a person can comment on that as it being anywhere near what would be normal, in normal times, because it's just been just real challenging for everybody, but especially when you're in a new position. But yeah, being in the principal chair at the high school level for 18 years, handling discipline issues for 18 years. Yeah, you get to, and I've been fortunate to be in schools where, in general, the greater number of parents that I would call with a problem with a child would support us, would support me, would support our school. Um, but you would always get the a response of the impression that the parent thinks you're picking on their child. That's a hard one to battle, and you're often not going to change that opinion. And I probably early in my career spent too much time trying to change their opinion on that, because you're just not going to. It's better to just present, tell them you're doing the best you can. The most important things there are consistency. You know, we, if anything, I over evaluate when I make a discipline decision because I want to be as consistent. I want to be perceived as fair, even though some people can spin that how they want. But I think for disciplinarians, that's a challenge all the time. But I can say without a doubt, when the parents, there's no doubt when the parents support the administrator calling home, that administrator doesn't have to call home very often, because they're together and on the same page. The I guess the pushback when you get that tends to happen more often because in my opinion, the child knows, well, I can do this because I'm going to get the backing of my parent. So it does lead to some more challenges, but that's one thing. Mr. Such and such doesn't like me, those kind of things, which is the farthest thing from the truth. Most of us try make an effort after we deal with a student in trouble. One of the more important things you can do is the next day when you see him, you speak to him, and you speak to him in a positive manner, like you've moved on. So they know you've moved on, so those kind of things, you know, they fly around. We hear a lot of that. From an administrator point of view, those are the dealing with discipline for 18 years can wear you down a little bit, and those are the things that do the most of it, because they're kind of attacks on your credibility, you know.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That's a great that's a great point of view, and great way of talking about that. So let me ask you this, which is a segue into my next question, based off what you said. How do you get buyout from the parents, right? Because you said, hey, when we do call the house and we do get buy-in from the parents, now we don't have to call as much because now we're on the same page. So how do you build that relationship with parents as well as with your scholars in your district?
Boy, that's the $1 million question right there. That's a good question. There's nothing easy about getting that, and I can't say that. I guess I feel like I maintained that through the years, but I was also placed and hired in a position where there was trust in the school. So I came into that situation where there's trust in the school. So, 70, 80% of our parents I call, it's got, it's our school. We trust them. And I feel like at least I didn't establish that because it was there, but I feel like I maintained that. That was important to me to do. I think those kids and the parents, you mentioned the word relationship, and that's the most important part of it. And I can't sit here and tell you that I called the parents for positive reasons very often, and I should have. And we encourage teachers to do that. Time is a hard thing. I guess that's an excuse, but they do need to hear positives to cultivate a good relationship. It's easier for the kids for you to do that with the kids because you know that kid that needs to hear the positive. Well, they've been in my office 6 times this year. I just saw him do something good. I'm going to thank him for that. So it's important to do those things. You don't get as many opportunities with the parents there, but you rely on the kid echoing that at home. Eventually, the student is going to realize that you're not out to get them. If you work on that. Now, I can't say I was always successful at that, but because you don't always have the time to do those things, but that's the goal. Um, and if you have trust, if the parents trust the community trusts your school, that's a great start in being able to do that. I've often said that I've been fortunate to work in the school. I've been here for, you know, 18 years or so, 17, 18, something like that. I wouldn't, I wouldn't, I wouldn't work as a high school principal in very many schools just due to the challenges. I believe it's the most challenging job out there, and I've been fortunate to do it in a good community and school. And for the people that aren't, where there's not a lot of trust there, boy, I can't imagine doing that. It'd be tough. It'd be tough, but I've been lucky to be at a good place. So those challenges are a little less.
Awesome. I think that that's big, right? Like being able to build the relationships, building the relationship to the point with people in the community they trust, right? Like you said, they trust the
Yeah.
school, they trust who you are, and things of that nature. So I think that's really, really good. Um, what is one piece of advice, right? And so I'm going to ask you this, but I would like for you to give me on both sides of the spectrum, right? Because again, you were a principal, but now you're a superintendent, right? And so what is one piece of advice that you would give to one starting out in your career, both being a principal as well as with you being a fairly new superintendent?
Yeah, yeah, you bet. Boy, I had the good fortune of having a good mentor during my time as a high school principal. My superintendent was a good one to bounce things off of, to seek advice and so forth. So, um, but through that process, and I will give, I guess, two sides to this advice. But one is to make as create and find as many relationships with your colleagues as you can, fellow administrators in your buildings, in your district. Very important to staying sane during the job, no doubt. But also, other principals that you see at meetings and sharing. My mentor used to, there are times when I didn't go to a meeting. Honestly, there's so many meetings out there that an administrator could go to. You could be gone all the time, and then you come back and there's more for you to do. So I'd skip a meeting here or there to stay at school. And he, at least, especially early in my career, he would encourage me, listen, man, you got to go to those meetings because you need to hear that these other principals are going through the same thing you are. Because it's stressful when you have people challenging your decisions. It's a very stressful thing, and sometimes you feel like you're on an island. And going to hear the other administrators in other schools dealing with the same issues, or maybe worse, it does help to give you perspective. So I think one is doing that without a doubt. But then two, as you bring those ideas back and you are in your office or you're in your district and you're making an important decision that there's a lot of them, doesn't matter which way you go, there's going to be somebody that's not happy with you. And some of them just aren't black and white, and so at that point, my advice is just, trust yourself. You're trying to do the right thing. Just trust yourself, and collect all the eggs. Kind of like anything else, you research it. Like we were talking about research earlier. You research it. You make the best decision you possibly can. Trust yourself and do it. And sometimes we mess it up, and I've told parents that at times, I may have messed this one up. I don't know. You just be honest with them, but I hopefully not too often. You have to do that, but we're not perfect. But when you are kind of on an island and we look for reassurance, there's not a lot of that sometimes. So my advice: trust yourself. Yeah, there's much evidence as you can, but you're in a position because people trust you to be there and make that decision the best you can and go with it.
Okay. All right. I love that. I love that. I love that. That's funny you asked that. So this is actually going to be I'm going to ask you a hot seat question, and this is actually going to be great. And I would like for you to give this um, from the point of view as a superintendent. So it would be great to hear this. Is there a number that you think or you believe educators um, should be paid? And before you answer that, um, is there a number like value wise, right? That you could pay teachers as like, okay, this is a start with us moving in the right direction, right? So is
Mhm.
there a number? And I would like for you to touch on that. So as a
Yeah, yeah,
superintendent, right? So
yeah.
let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's going to be, and it may be important for any listeners to know my location, because the answer to that question and a lot of these questions could differ from maybe somebody your location in a big city. I'm located in a rural area of Southwest Missouri in the Ozarks, so we're a smaller school in comparison to some of that. So the numbers would be different for sure. But absolutely, like at my district. Um, yeah, I would have a number in mind. Our base salary, we raised it this past year to 34.5, which I'm sure is going to differ. Your city schools, Kansas City, St. Louis here in Missouri, I'm sure significantly higher than that. And I know even in Springfield they are. So without a doubt, I mean, when you're talking about paying teachers and making them feel appreciated, keeping them in the profession, those kind of things. To me, that's number one on the list. Now, is that the only thing? No, I don't think so. But that's to get their attention. I mean, our teachers here, they ought to be getting 50, 55, 60. I mean, I'm a little. You could probably accuse me of being biased too. That's fair. But I see what they do every day. I see them working with kids every day and how valuable they are. And so, yeah, now that may be what they make elsewhere, but we've got to start there. And that's that. That's my point of view anyway, for sure.
Absolutely. I think if there was a number, I think there should be what I say. I think the base minimum starting teachers out at, I think it should be 80K.
Yeah.
I really do, for a number of reasons, right? Like you said, you're in Southwest Missouri, you're in a very rural area, and so your teachers, right, the teachers that that work in your district, you said you raised it to 34.5, and so for some of those teachers, they're going to be forced to get another job,
Hmm.
whether if it's starting a side hustle, whether if it's being a waitress or bartender or whatever the case may be. They're going to be forced to having another job so that way they can make ends meet. And I don't think that that's fair, right? Like educators, like let's think about it. Let's think about it for a second, Mr. Dougherty. We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have politicians, we have entertainment figures, and things of that nature. Who were the people that poured into them for them to get to that level?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would argue, those some of those people are our kids, idols, or, they admire them. But if I could argue that our teachers are the most important people in our community, and you'd be hard pressed to prove me wrong. You know, what they instill in our kids, uh, you just can't put a value on it. Um, and yeah, I have all kinds of thoughts on the teacher shortage and the issues with it, and why. And um, it's been coming for a while. You look at the numbers of people coming out of those education programs for the past 20 years, and it's slowly been decreasing. And it's just kind of come to a head since COVID. And it's very concerning where we're going to be in 3, 4, 5 years. And I've heard some people say, well, it can't get worse. And um, it absolutely can get worse. And I believe it's going to get worse. And if you think about it, if let's say we found a solution that would improve that today. Let's say we raised salaries, or we did something maybe to lure some more people in. It's going to be 4 or 5 years before we see the results of that. Um, so it's a scary situation. In my opinion, for those of us in the profession, it's just flying under the radar. People starting to hear about it a little bit. We had some in our community that thought we were doing something dramatically wrong here, because we had more turnover this year than we've ever had, and it was like 12 people out of it was like it's 12%. Oh no, it's less than that. I can't remember right now, but it was more than we've ever had. So it was automatically, well, what's wrong up there? But I don't think your general parents and community members understand where everything's at, and the direction it's headed. And it's concerning. It's very concerning. People with young kids or kids in schools, really, they need to be paying attention, because it's going to impact their kids in the next 5 years, no doubt.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I say why I believe that 80K is because you have to take into consideration living expenses, right? If they have kids, you know what I'm saying, things of that nature, bills, and just, and like I said, living expenses and stuff. But I think, like, hey, okay, if you can't pay 80K, and let's say that you can say, you know what, we're going to start out at a base minimum of 55 or 50 or 60, then I feel like there should be some type of incentive program, right? Whether if it's like helping you get a house, right? Getting your first house, and us helping you with that, or getting a vehicle, right? Like my co-host, Dante, he talks about how, he got his first vehicle through a graduate program.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome.
I think like having those conversations and just having some type of incentive, right? So now when we start having those, when we start making those changes and having those incentives, now we can start to pick better candidates out of the
Mm.
melting pot of educators. Now we can start, our educator burnout can start declining, and things of that nature. So I think if we could find a good number to start educators out, I think that now we can start moving in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And probably the number I threw out there, that's probably the number that's going to start to draw more people in. The number you throw out there, that's going to get the quality people in there, and in the, I mean, what do we want for our kids? I mean, every parent's going to say we want the best people possible. Well, if that's truly what we want, then let's make decisions that reflect that. Let's do something that affects that. And and until there's some significant changes made, uh, it, it's concerning. I'll try not to be too negative, but I'll just say it's concerning. You know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Listen, man, listen. It's like I told you. This podcast is not about us. It's for educators like you. So, you know, I want to allow you to use your voice. I want you to speak from the heart. Again, it's all about you. I know you're a superintendent, so I know there's those. You got to tiptoe those areas. So I get it.
You
Um,
know, you do, but no, I don't want to come across as a negative educator, I guess, but I don't mind speaking my mind. Another thing that exhausts me is through the years, and I know it exhausts our teachers and probably teachers everywhere. I see it out there on social media now as they look forward to coming back, and somewhere along the line, there's been a transition and maybe a competition almost on how many things we can put on their plate, or how many. Sometimes it might be administrators wanting to show to the board, this is the new thing we're doing. Um, really good teaching 30 years ago is still good teaching. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Um, our insurance companies and attorneys make decisions that require the teachers to do training. They come back, they've got to do how many hours of training. It's insane. So we're trying to regulate them into perfect people, and me too. We all have to do the training, but we now, I don't know what the percentage of their job is now that is not 100, that is not right on teaching their kids.
right.
Planning and teaching their kids isn't. I mean, you've got this portion of their job duties now that don't have anything to do with that. And why are we doing that? Why don't we let them focus? That's their job. That's their most important task. Why are we doing all this other crap? To be honest with you, it makes no sense to me. And so what we do here, we take that training. I mean, I was new to the job and in COVID in superintendent job, but I'm responsible for our training ultimately. So I mean, I called the state. I said, what are we responsible for? I want to know, so we get this long list. And so we sit down as principals and, okay, how can we do this in a shorter amount of time? We're not putting all this on video. I mean, that'd be 25, 30 hours of training. It's ridiculous. So there's not requirements on how you do all the training. So we've tried to shorten it as best we can while still fulfilling the requirement. But um, we're kind of, like I said, we're in a rural setting, some old school, I guess, somewhat mentality still. And we try to stay out of their way and let them do their jobs. And I think our teachers, they appreciate that wholeheartedly. And I think that's the way it ought. I'm biased again, but that's the way it ought to be everywhere. Let them do their job. Stay out of their hair. As long as they're doing their job, let them do it. But we're not here to provide busy work, show off what we're doing on a new task, a new strategy in teaching. I just think we've gotten in the way of ourselves some, and they're professionals. Let them do their jobs.
Yep. I love it. I love it. You in your bag now. I can tell. I can tell. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Getting
I
me
love
fired
it.
up there.
I love it. Yes, sir. I love it. I love it. I love it. Wonderful. So let me ask you this: if there was one thing, right? And when I say this, I want you to think on a global scale. All right. If there was one thing, and they say, "Hey, Randy, we want you to come and meet with the Department of Education. We want you to come meet with the president. Hey, if there's one thing you would like for us to change, what would that be? We would implement it immediately, and it would work for all 50 states. and everybody would have to follow, that rule or law, or if there's something you would take away, what would be that one thing that you would change about the education system?
Oh man, I don't want to fail to give us another topic to discuss, but it would be the salary issue, no doubt. That would be the number
Mm.
one thing. Um, to maybe hit on something else. I mean, there's plenty to be done, but that's where we got to start. And it's got to be changed. It's not a little, throwing some change here or an incentive to do here or
Right.
a little bonus here. And I
Mhm.
think you got to show them. The teaching staff as a whole, they know they see through things that aren't long term. The state of Missouri made a change this year. They set the minimum salary at 38,000 this year up, which so it's complicated, but in essence, it didn't do anything for our veteran teachers. It raised us across the nation out of the cellar, maybe on the base salary. And so, you know, I won't say much about that, but it just, if we're trying to help morale, paying the new first year teacher as much as you're paying your 10th or 11th year teacher, not going to do much for us in the scope of morale. But, you know, in my opinion, school safety is something that we've got to continue to work on. And I think in the profession, we've got to work on. There's a lot of experts out there. I think people have to be careful who they listen to. There are a lot of people trying to make a lot of money. And I say that after just, I created something that I feel we need. Um, and I'd put it up there with anything right now. And I would put it up there that it's as cheap as anything now. But my intentions are good with that. I would love, I think it ought to be in every school. And if it was in every school and we could make it, as cheap as possible, hey, that'd be great. But I think school people got to get together, and it's just so complicated. The response, there's so many parts to it. And the one focus mine is just the response, that, the delays that I think honestly fly under the radar too. When the bad guy gets on campus, there's a delay there. Look at all, if you do the research, there's rarely a lockdown announcement made. It's just not made because there's got to be communication through the building. Who communicates when their life is maybe in danger? There's just a lot of complexities to that. But not just that, but that's where my focus has been. But the security of buildings, the having school security, SROs in buildings, which I'm a supporter of, and then the politics get thrown in. It's so complicated. And I wish we could just leave that out and try to focus on what's best for our kids. But it's really just sickening what's happening there. And that's not helping our ability to keep teachers and recruit teachers. Um, but without turning our schools into, fortresses, we've got to find better ways. And I know you are a believer in relationships from researching your website a little bit. That's really where it all starts. So that's not something I could go to DC and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Everybody magically has good relationships with their kids and maybe can work to prevent some of that stuff. But that's the scary part. But the salary thing, sorry, back to that. That's it. Talk is cheap, and they got to change something, because there's going to be in the next 5 years more teachers getting out than there's coming in. That's going to happen every year, and we're going to have more non-certified teachers teaching in classrooms this year than we've ever had. Well, what's going to happen next year? It's going to be a higher number. The next year, it's going to be a higher number. So, and that's not to say those non-certified people aren't capable. Some of them will be very capable, but I don't know that all of them will be. And uh, it's just highly concerning for those of us, and I know for you in the profession, it's scary right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Love your take on that. So yeah, I absolutely think that, like you said, funding, right? Funding.
Yep.
We have a previous episode with the behavior coordinator for the state of Texas, and she talked about, hey, if we could get funding in order, Logan, like I think that, like she said, that would be the one thing that she would change. So you all
Yeah.
are right in alignment with each other, in what you're saying. So I really think that was, I agree. I
Yeah.
just really think, right, like if
Put
you
the
have the
yeah
proper
put the
funding, yeah,
yeah
if you have the
put the
proper
funding where it's
funding,
important. If it's
yep,
important, put the
absolutely.
funding up there. You know.
Absolutely. Because then you can have the proper resources and tools, right, for the
Yeah.
teachers, which also means that the teachers will be able to pour better. They will be able to pour into your scholars better, which also gives you a return on your investment, right? Because now if they see, like, oh, Mr. Doherty, oh man, he made me want to be a teacher. You know what I'm saying? And things like
Yeah.
that. So I think that stuff like that is important to be able to do things like that. So yeah, absolutely. I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Absolutely. So let me ask you, with you being the superintendent and things of that nature, right? What are some challenges? Well, better yet, let's do it this way. How have you been able to avoid educator burnout? Because I know you said you've been in, education for 26 years. So how have you been able to avoid educator burnout?
Oh boy, it's tough. The last couple of years, it's been tough, and I don't know that I can tell you that I've avoided it personally, wholeheartedly, because it's there's been so much the last 2 years. You basically doubled your school stress just as a result of COVID, and you've got two groups in that whole realm that are pulling for their opinions that are right, and you need to be whatever it is, masks or whatever. They're pulling one way and the other's pulling the other, and that's just not not counting your normal school stress. It's been tough, and I think I tend to think most of us feel the same, whether we're administrators or teachers. It's been exhausting. Um, so you throw in some criticism from community or board members, and I tell you, I've been a little thin skinned with that. I've probably been a little short at times because it's just been so darn stressful, and we've all done the best we could. We've all tried to maintain things for our kids as best we can. And I and our I probably can speak for all of our schools because they've all got good people in them. But I know our school here, our people were incredible at trying. Our people maintained the best uh, atmosphere they could based with what we were dealing with, and our kids, they knew there was different things were different, and there was change there, but our teachers, they love our kids, so they tried to provide things with as much normalcy as they could. It was challenging, but to avoid that, I don't know. I don't know that I can answer that question. That's a tough one, and we were worried about our teachers this last year coming off that COVID year. So our challenge has been administrators talking. How can we lessen the load? What can we do? When I'll stand by it, but when we have PD days, we don't load them up with stuff. We don't. We never have here. But that kind of lends itself to what I talked about before. But that's not to say there's not a few things where maybe we need to meet for a little bit, or they're in their groups. We do the necessary things for their teaching, but we're not just going to keep them busy to keep them busy. And especially now, and if there's a school out there, and I'm sure there are doing that are overwhelming them, they got to back off. I think everybody's got to back off. And in my opinion, before we should have been, we're be careful with what we, distract them with. We got to be careful with that. And especially now, um, cut them a break. Let them focus on their job and look after them. Make sure they're looking after themselves. Try to keep everybody in the community as best you can. It's hard for me to preach that sometimes because I may make a decision that they don't like, but but that's the message that I want to send always, is that they're important, and the most important thing here, other than our kids, and boy, we got to look after them right now, or they're not going to be around. And that's a good question. I'd be interested in other people's answers to that, because they have to have done a better job at answering it than I did. But it's a tough one. It's a tough one right now.
Absolutely. Well, I've had we've had guests come on, and a few of them have said a few different things within regards to educator burnout. Some of them have said they've given self care tips. Some of them have said, "Hey, listen, I was on the verge, but this is what I did. I pushed through it." Different things like that. And they were saying like I went back to the basics of why I got into education, um, or why I became a teacher and different things like that. So I
Yeah,
just think that, man, I really think if we could give people the support that they need, right? Like allowing them to use their voice, allowing them to say, hey, you are seen, hey, you are heard, hey, I just want you to know that you matter. And then so I think because I feel like, we are going through trying times, like you said, coming out of that first year immediately right after COVID, after the year that we had, like, oh man, like teachers were stressed out of their minds.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, I think like, yo, like let's allow them to be heard. Like it needs to be more than just saying, "Hey, let me give you pizza," and say, or order y'all food and say, "Hey, we appreciate what y'all do." Like no, it needs to be
yeah.
more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing we did do, and we looked at our sick leave policy this year. I was doing that during the school year, so I it probably didn't do a very good job of opening that up for input for our staff, because I didn't get any. I mentioned it a couple times, so we got into this summer where we were going to approve that, and then I did hear a little feedback, and so anyway, I ended up opening that up again. And we used to have a policy where we allow 8 sick days, or 8 or 10 sick days and 2 personal days, for example. Well, we changed that now where all days can be used however you want. So that's a more pro staff approach to
Right.
things, and so may not be huge, but I
Right.
think it's one step, a small step in showing them. I hope that, hey, we're willing to make some changes, so now they could. I mean, they can take some more days off. They don't have, and honestly, and I never thought as an administrator I'd do this, but we're borderline to the point of encouraging them to take their days off when they need them. I mean, basically that's what they've got to do, to be their best here. When they need a day, they got to take it. And so yeah, we have done some of those things. I guess as an administrator, I've found, as a superintendent, as a principal for 18 years, I was around the kids a lot. As a superintendent, and this is the worst part of the job. You're in an office, and if you don't make an effort, you don't see kids all day. And I don't like that part of the job. I can tell you that. Um, Going to the elementary, when the kids are getting off the bus, that's the best part of your day right there. And so I have had to make myself do that some. Um, and sometimes you don't feel like you have time, but you mentioned somebody going back to what got them into the field, and there's nothing better than going and spending just a few minutes with elementary kids. It doesn't get any better than that. And I was a high school person most of my career, and I love them too. But those younger kids, they're a lot of fun.
I love it. I love it. That's amazing. That's amazing. So I got one or two more questions to ask before we get up out of here. But real quick, I got to pay some bills, Mr. Dougherty. So just give me 1 second. Listen, guys, this is the Class in Session podcast. I am with the superintendent, Mr. Randy Dougherty. He is the superintendent of Skyline School District. However, listen, guys, if you think or you love the value that Mr. Dougherty is adding, you love the value that Class in Session is adding, listen, please share this with your network, share this with your community, share this with your colleagues, right? Because it's important. As well as, listen, I need you to like, subscribe, and comment. I need you to do those three things for me. I need you to like, subscribe, and comment. You can do those three things for us. I promise you it would be immensely appreciated. So, again, guys, this is the Class in Session podcast, and make sure that you like, subscribe, and comment. All right, Mr. Dougherty. So, with you being superintendent, what has been one of the most challenging things for you, as well as what has been one of the most rewarding things for you with being the superintendent for Skyline School District the past 2 years?
Boy, it's easier. You mentioned challenging. It's easier to pick those things out these last 2 years. The as I talk to my colleagues that first and second year, I echo or I hear an echo of, man, you got in at the worst possible time, the worst possible time. So there's a lot to learn in school finance, and a person's not going to pick all that up in 2 years, maybe not 5 years, but each year you're going to get better. So if we throw COVID out, that's obviously the most challenging part of coming into something. Let's throw that out. The most challenging part of just accepting the responsibility of finance for a school district, that is humbling, and and that's the best word I guess I can. And it's enormous. That's an enormous responsibility to have. So communicating with my predecessor on that, who retired and is still here, and all my colleagues that I trust, has kept me afloat. To be honest with you, you know that's overwhelming when you just start out and you've been doing a different job for 18 years, and there's you don't get a lot of prep for it, to be honest with you. You just learn as you go, and that's been that's been the most challenging. Dealing with people, we're all used to that. Not to say we're experts at it, but solving problems, that's part of the challenge of our job. But finance, and and I guess I'm a worrier, so worrying that I don't put the district in a bad position almost constantly, until I'm to the point now where I feel more comfortable with it than I did a couple years ago. But, I don't want to be the one to put a district in a bad situation. So I want to do things the right way. So though, that's probably the most challenging, the most rewarding, as a teacher, as a principal, those rewards, intrinsic rewards, kind of reduce as you go up. I feel. Um, so just honestly, us getting through 2 years of probably the most challenging 2 years that any of us will experience in our career, and still keeping things together, and still, caring for each other. And honestly, again, we're in a rural district here. So we were able to provide our kids a lot of experiences, both academically and activity wise, that a lot of kids didn't get in the country 2 years ago. Now, did we have to cancel? Did we have to adjust? Absolutely, we did things, and I'm not a political person, so I don't enjoy talking politics. I'd just soon us talk about what's best for kids, and that's what we tried to focus on. And we may, no doubt, we made some decisions wrong, like everybody did. We were kind of going into that blindly. Nobody knew what to do, but we knew we didn't want kids to miss out on a year of good experience. And probably to say what I'm most proud of is that our staff, in my opinion, was able to do that. And they did it. They care about our kids, and they probably put themselves in harm's way at times to do that. I think we all did, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that, and I think we'd probably do it again if we had to. But there's lots to be proud of in schools. We got so many good kids, as you know, and people. social media can drown that out sometimes. Social media is not good for our staff because you hear the empty barrels so often. It's the noise, and I think I mentioned to you that, hey, what, you asked about the perception or a myth, and I've been in it long enough that I guess I have gotten pretty good at filtering out the noise. You have to if you're going to be in this profession some, and um, but it's hard. But social media, there can't be enough positivity on there about education and teachers for our teachers to hear. There just can't be enough positivity on there. So, um, it'd be great to have that used as a positive tool to reinforce to them they're appreciated and they're important. And unfortunately, that's not always what happens. But um, boy, what a topic to discuss. Though, those are good questions. I could go on a while, as you could tell.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, you can listen. I told you before we came on, listen,
Mhm.
this is about you. Speak from the heart. Bring, speak on, what's on your heart, what's on your mind, and things of that nature. And I'm loving everything that you're bringing to the table. I'm loving our conversation and everything that you do. Like, I didn't even know that you were in a very rural area. I didn't know that you were,
Yeah.
in the Ozarks and things of that nature. Like, I've seen the Netflix show Ozark, and of course, I know that
Yeah.
doesn't really paint
No.
such a great picture, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Honestly, I haven't seen that. But we're just in a rural area, about an hour north of Springfield, Missouri.
mhm.
We got 750 kids in our school, K-12. So we're
Yeah.
small. There's a lot of schools around here smaller than us.
Mhm.
It just depends on your perspective, but the conversations are important regardless of where you're at. I appreciate the
Absolutely.
fact that you're having those with all of us and not just the big city schools that
Absolutely.
you're having conversations with us too. I appreciate that.
Well, like I say, you all matter as well, right? Like, just because, I'm from a small city. So, I understand and I get it. And so, you all matter as well. Your voice matters as well. Just because, you're in a rural area, like you said, K through 12, 750 kids. Why don't your voice matter? You're in the education space as well. You know what I'm saying? You
You
have
bet.
you have lives of little people, or a younger, or our next generation. You have lives to impact as well. So why not give you that opportunity, right? Why
You
not
bet.
express to let you know that you matter, and why not to hear your point of view, or hear what you have to say, because there's somebody else that's going to listen to this, right? And they
Yep.
may be in a small rural area, and they may say, hey, Superintendent Randy Dougherty, I listened to the podcast, and he was talking about, these are some of the things that they did. He talked about his lockdown app. Like, hey, we need to move in this direction. And I'm gonna reach out to him to see if, hey, he could give us some best practices or strategies from being a principal, or from being, a superintendent for the past 2 years. So, that's what it's about. It's about adding value in class and session. It's about leaving, making an impact, leaving this place better than the way that we found it, and just being a solution to a problem that has been ongoing in the education space.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
No, I appreciate you. So, how can, before we get out of here, how can people, there, well, two things, excuse me, if you can you give some motivation to somebody that may, like you said, be in a rural area, small school district, maybe smaller than yours, right? If you could you give them some motivation? And then, as well as, how can people get in contact with you if they have any questions about the lockdown app, if they have any questions about being a superintendent, or even a principal? So if you could, Mr. Dougherty, could you, give us some motivation to our educators out there?
Yeah, absolutely. one little saying that it isn't on mine. I don't own it. I can't even remember where I found it. But one little statement that is a good reminder to us. And I mentioned before how many distractions there are out there to what our actual jobs are, especially our teachers. But it's the same for administrators. There are a lot of things out there that we're doing that all distracts from our number one goal and can be stressful. But and that would be to keep your attention on your intention. Um, what are your intentions? It's a matter of looking back. Okay, what's our goals? What's most important? And I have to remind myself of that sometimes because we will get distracted and we will get frustrated with things, and all of us. And keeping that perspective and our attention on our intention on what's most important, and it's our kids, and what are we doing with them, and how are we teaching them, how are we working with them, do they know them, all those things, relationships, where do we want our attention, and wherever that is, that's I'm sorry, wherever we want our intention, that's what we need to be focused on. We all have these other things we got to get done. Those are tasks, but our intention is most important. Um, and as far as contacting me, you bet. I have a school email. It is RD as in dog, OUGHERTY at skylineschools.net. And I'm with it's the Hickory County R1 school district, but we go by Skyline. But anybody can email me at any time there. My app, the Lock Now safety app website is locknow.com. I'm sorry, locknowapp.com. I should remember that. Uh, somebody could reach out to me for educational purposes on there too. There's information on there. I think it's a good thing that once I've put it in a lot of people's hands, they're like, okay, yeah, this is going to solve a problem. So, but whether it's school related stuff, safety related stuff, I enjoy having conversations like we did today. I appreciate your intentions on trying to get the word out on how to change things in a positive way. I like what you're doing here, man, and I appreciate you letting me be a part of it for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Dougherty. But before we get out of here, I definitely want to give you your flowers. I definitely want to, say thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you do um, at the top level, right? Because I know it's not easy, and I know that it's rough, and you are the middle person between politicians and your teachers, right? And
Yep.
your people that work up under you. And I just want to say thank you for who you are, for what you do in the education space, and the value that you bring to your community, as well as to your staff and your teachers and everybody that works up under you. Because I know it hasn't been easy, and I know you probably don't hear thank you enough. And so, I just want to say that and give you your flowers and let you know that, we appreciate you here, at Y.B.Normal in the Class and Session podcast.
I appreciate it, buddy. Appreciate it very much.
Yes, sir. So, guys, listen, man, this was the Class in Session podcast. I am your host, Logan Taylor. We had the superintendent of the Skyline School District, Mr. Randy Dougherty. We want to say shout out to him, and thank you for being a part of this journey with us. And to my co-host, my partner in crime, my brother, Mr. Dontay Hampton, we send out our well wishes to him as well. And listen, guys, if you love what we're doing, you love the value that we're adding, please, 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 please leave a review, right? Comment, like, and subscribe. And you can find us on any podcast platform. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, all the social media platforms, even LinkedIn. All right. So make sure you tap in with us. And, like always, in closing, why be normal when you can be extraordinary? We'll see you guys again soon. All right. Peace.